Wow.
We aren't finished yet, are we?
It's been 15 years since Coraline was released, and here we are with a combination of the crew who worked on the original puppets, and some of whom are working on Coraline puppets for the first time, bringing her build into the modern age. I'm Simon Thompson. I'm delighted to be joined by Sid Tucker, Brian McLean, Jess Lynn, Ollie Jones, Anya Poland, Henry Brummelman, and Scott Tom. Thank you for offering your time between building Wildwood puppets to talk about the film and the puppet that started it all.
It's Coraline Jones.
Who remembers this? This is Coraline character design artwork. Now, when you guys look at these designs, what are the first questions and the challenges that you all, as puppet fabricators, see, and how do you begin to ideate a build?
First thing, I look at that and I think, how are those knees going to bend? That's the first thing I see on her.
How we're going to fit a joint in there that's going to actually operate and not collapse and be strong enough.
Try and break down the visual elements and try and start imagining how they're going to move. And are we going to have to compensate for them? Are we going to have special builds for them? Yeah, there's a lot of questions there.
There's a lot of panic sometimes.
A lot of panic.
Like you look at the knees, I look at those eyeballs and think they're huge. How are they going to fit inside the head? So I think each of us sort of look at it from our own vantage point and figure out how the heck are we going to do this.
Once we start working with sculpts, maquette, and then on top of that, once animation understands performance prompts, so looking at storyboards and knowing how it's going to behave, like all of that plays into the final product. So something, maybe we lose a certain shape in that design, but we gain something for a performance element.
What drives a lot of that is just the expectation. The animation that we're trying to produce has a lot more fluidity, has a lot more nuance and naturalism to it. And so that goes into everything. Our armature designs, how we engineer costumes, goes into facial. So that expectation becomes the driving force for everything.
It's also really easy, I think, to forget everything about her was a conscious choice. Especially in her case, she's incredibly asymmetrical. And it could be so easy to kind of be like, oh, I'm just going to shore that up, kind of like lift that side or that, and forget that it was like, no, that was a choice.
Design choices.
That was a design choice at the time.
We meant to do it like that.
Yeah.
It's fun. You can actually look at the armature and see that one knee is significantly higher than the other, and that's on purpose.
What has changed in puppet fabrication since 2008?
So one of the benefits that we all can have access on this digital model now is that we can make costume dummies so they can start the costume much earlier in the process, but it also lets us make digital molds while everybody else is making like the armature or the costume. And the fact that this is printed makes you able to print more molds at the same time.
Yeah, it was definitely more sequential. When we say that this was our original Coraline, that meant one sculptor had made one clay thing and that was it. So we had to give this delicate little thing to a mold maker and say, don't mess this up. This is it.
Yeah, and it was a lot harder to reiterate on, like if you wanted to change anything on the body sculpt, from how do you compare like the revisions to the original as well, which in 3D now we can just overlay that.
We're making copies on top of copies each time, and it's a challenge to not lose fidelity as we are learning, as we're trying to recreate Coraline now 15 years later, trying to capture what we did the first time. Coraline was Leica's first film, so a lot of the structure for that film was built for that movie. We have a lot of versions of Coraline that we have to sift through to try to figure out what is our original, because we made Coralines for different purposes. And so it was a bit of an archaeological dig to try to figure out how to build Coraline again, because our original things have broken down over time.
Yeah, I mean, there's bits and pieces of costume, not everything, but there's something to go off of. There's armature bits left, there's some eye rig bits left, there's, some boxes of stuff. And basically what we have in archives is whatever was left over from production.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. We were able to go over to archives, and our archivists had pulled a lot of the original materials, and we learned some really fascinating facts, like that none of her seams on this raincoat were actually sewn. They were all glued. And I was able to really study these and sort of see what's on the inside, and All the foam on the inside has crumbled. But I was able to use this to take a pattern off of it.
Because we needed to make everything match with previous Coralines, we had to make some very specific choices. And that made us come to terms with choices we made 15 years ago. So we spent a lot of time starting to make sure that all of our rebuilds will match our old faces, because we want to use our library faces.
Yeah, the replacement faces were a big part of Coraline's design expectation, or performance expectation, I should say. I have here some Coraline faces, so they would come out in this white plastic. They then needed to be primered gray and then sanded smooth, and then they were painted with the lacquer. And we were trying to figure out how we were going to paint Coraline's teeth. So we created a mouth bag. So you'd paint the teeth separately, and then you'd stick it in behind, and they would register and snap into place.
I'm from Pontiac, Michigan.
So we quickly found that the faces will gradually start to wear out the plastic registration part on the head. So as you put faces on and off over and over again, eventually this part wears down. And we were kind of boxed in a corner, because normally we would just take off the hair cap, put on a new core, but we couldn't.
Yeah, I think there was always this back and forth with our teams. Even just the tiniest little gap, like around the eyes, will be magnified. It can sometimes just be because one little piece of hair got wedged between the face and the registration of the head. We really wanted to maybe push stop motion hair. I think the scene, particularly when she's looking under the bed and you see all the individual strands fall down, it was interesting to see animators kind of request more and more, because it was pretty cool to just see how much life it brought to the performance rather than just having a single strand.
Come on, blue hair, my swampers, and raincoat.
Were you around when the conversation became blue hair?
What I recall, and you can kind of see it on this sample right here, she reads more black, right?
Yeah.
The artist put in blue highlights. And then,
midnight blue.
Yeah, and then something about that was like, oh, maybe she has blue hair. And then if you look in the film, there's a photograph of the family unit, and she has brown hair. It's supposed to represent where Coraline is in her relationship with her family. She's kind of, because it's like she wants the more colorful gloves, where her mom's kind of like, no, we're doing the uniform.
Put them back. But Mom, the whole school's gonna wear boring gray clothes. No one will have these.
It's iconic now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's hugely iconic. You
Yeah.
can just see that color or that profile and you instantly know it's Coraline.
Huh.
When you were remaking these puppets 15 years later, what challenges did you expect and what did you not see coming?
We went through the archives and we had a look at what was there, and there seemed to have been like lots of different versions of this raincoat fabric. It's a wet look spandex, and they were maybe more popular in the early 2000s than they are now. So we were having a real hard time trying to find something similar, so we actually had to recreate it. As far as I know, which we learned from Deb Cook, our costume designer, there was actually a coating on top of this as well, so in the movie it's a lot shinier than what you see here. The bottom of the jacket needs to deform, so all these wires need to be built in. It's actually got to move like real fabric. And on the original Coraline, those were actually quite stiff, so I've gone with more a standard wire that the animators prefer on new movies. But I was referring back to the original Coraline, so I didn't want to change it too much. The wire actually kind of gives her that bell shape at the bottom of the jacket, so I didn't want to remove that because I felt like that was part of her character.
It was a pain in the butt to have to super glue an eyeball. And now our current builds of current puppets are a lot more user-friendly.
I've heard a lot of questions where, we utilize VFX and CG now to help comp in elements. And there's kind of like, well, but what about the handmade? Are you worried that's going to go away? And I can say that it just means more puppets, more units, more things, so we can just continue to add.
This idea of the computer coming into stop motion was a real fear. And I think and it was truthful, because a lot of people in stop motion had just gotten kind of burned by everything that they were used to was now being done in the computer.
I brought a friend.
It's great to see just how there's been this real acceptance of trying to use technology in a really artful way, and you don't have to lose the handmade quality.
It's not like our movies, how long it takes us is getting any shorter. If anything, it's like, well, we've saved time there, so let's get more ambitious here. It's like we've never done it to be like, hey, save some weeks.
Any efficiency is quickly absorbed with more complexity.
That's exactly what this digital process now as well. It's not like it got much shorter. No, we're doing 16 revisions on a body instead of 4.
Exactly.
That's what it used to be.
It's there to give animators better control and there to give more creative input from the directors. That's why this stuff is important.
Then that means that you can get a higher quality product because it's more considered.
Because we have a whole new generation of Coraline fans, what have these new puppet builds done to improve puppet performance and durability?
Because she is our most popular character, she wants to be used everywhere. So right now we're limited to just posing for still photos and things, and even that is wear and tear on the puppets and breaks them down. So having new silicone, new parts just means that now we can just have a new generation of puppets to use for whatever studio needs we want. And there's just more variety of what you can do with her and how we can show her to people.
It's so thrilling to have something this special, and the fact that we're making new ones that can kind of broaden that experience for people. We're really lucky that we got this opportunity to both work with Coraline again and to just further her interaction with her audience.
What this gives me is a reminder that the work we were doing 15 years ago, it was hard then, it's still hard now, and we're still pushing. Our tools are better, and we've learned a lot. We've inspired new people who can bring sort of new life to stuff we've done in the past. It's what feeds our future, is
No
the
está
seeds.
permitido, si no le voy a hablar a seguridad.
Ok,
Es piratería. Piratería.
ok,
¿Le hablo a seguridad?
ok,
¿Sí o no?
ok, si como quieras.